In the midst of us accepting and becoming Christians, there is something that deeply worries all of us, and that is the idea of how do we connect with God Himself? How do we plug into the supernatural? The book of Psalm 18 gives us a beautiful outlook that I would want to share with you. The Bible begins off by introducing us to two forms of critical revelation. It says the heavens declare the glory of the Lord, and the skies and the firmaments, they show us what the Lord has done with His own hands. Day after day, they pour out wisdom and speech, and night after night, they pour out knowledge. It almost looks like nature is never silent at all. When you look at what God has created, on Psalm 18 from verse 1 to verse 7, we learn of how and what God has literally done as His handwork in terms of His own scriptures. In other words, even those who cannot read, at least if you can see, if you can hear, if you can feel, if you can look in the atmosphere and in the weathers that are around and on the ground, you cannot doubt that God Himself was here. So from verse 1 to verse 7, we learn of what I call general revelation, where God Himself reveals Himself through His own handwork. In other words, on everything that God has done, you cannot miss to see the signature and the fingerprint of God Himself. This is maybe where I love the Africans, where we did not need to build churches to worship God. We worshiped God in the canopy of creation. For when you look at the trees, you look at the waters, you look at the fruits, you look at the animals, you cannot doubt that God Himself is responsible for nature. In His very nature, is very intelligent. There is coherence, there's cohabitation, there is interdependence, and there is all these forms of scientific formulas that gel together in the midst of nature. When you come from verses 7 going down to the end of the passage, then it begins to say, precepts of the Lord are good. The commandments of the Lord are good. Now we are talking about the specific revelation, which is the written word. So in other words, there are two Bibles that we need to introduce ourselves to. The first Bible is the natural Bible, which has to do with nature in its fullness and its conversation that it gives us as human beings. The second Bible is the Bible, which is the written scriptures themselves. And the scriptures, therefore, when you read in Timothy, it says all scripture, that's for another day, of course, are God-given. They are supposed to be working for us, to instruct us, to assist us in terms of growing to become fully men of God that are equipped for good works. Now, having explained these two books, which is the nature book and the Bible book, these two books work, therefore, to work on the third book, which is the book of your heart. Now, when Paul writes about that, he says, we are an open book that must be read even by people who are running across on horses. What does that mean, therefore? You must go outside, learn to love your nature, understand how nature is founded. In fact, all scientific discoveries have been discovered when people are in the business of observing nature. The biggest form of a library and encyclopedia is what God Himself has done. If you don't understand that, come back and read from the Word what God again is saying. When you combine those two scriptures, then you must begin to write the scripture of your own heart. Then it becomes true. In the future, then you can say the gospel according to Maponga J. The gospel according to Melus Njalambi. Because by then you have internalized the gospel concept. And now you become the living word yourself. So in the midst of us studying nature, studying the Bible, remember also that God and the world is studying you. What are you doing with the information that has been given to you? I hope this information will assist you to develop your own book so that even after you're gone, many other people can still read that book and find salvation. And let your life be an exhibition of the great works of what God is doing in your life.